Welcome to rpgamepire. I'm David Nisikowski, and I'm going to do the how to play video for Talisman Batman. So let's first start with the overview. It's a thematic game, 2 to 6 players, 60 to 90 minutes, ages 13 and up, with a roll and move mechanic and variable player powers, published by USAopoly. Now, for those of you who are familiar with the Fantasy Flight version of Talisman, or even the original Games Workshop version, you'll see that there's a lot of similarities here. In fact, you'll see that some of the cards have just been rethemed with Batman objects or characters. Okay, so the object of the game is to reach the security room at the top of the guard tower, which is the inner region. And there you need to defeat Batman, and you will disable the security systems and win the game. So the setup components you'll see here is a partial setup of the board. Only 2/3 of the board is shown because it's such a large board. Over here on the edge, it actually does go all the way around. The first floor is here, it does go around, and then the second floor, and here's the tower. You'll see here are the purchase cards, the coins, which is the version of bags of gold, Batman, which he can land on you and attack you, which is, from what I understand, similar to the Reaper in the 4th edition of Talisman, which I haven't played that version, but I guess he's similar to the Reaper. Here you have fate tokens, which allow you to re-roll, dice, figures for your for the player characters, alignment changes. Then you'll see here is you'll have a different deck for each region. So here's the Region 1 deck, the first floor deck, the second floor deck, the tower deck, and then here's the feat cards, which are basically spells if you've played the other editions of Talisman. So I just went over the play area setup. Now the character components, depending on which character you choose, you may have a feat, which is a spell. You might start with that, or any items, objects, some money. And then you'll see here that you have dials to keep track of your stat, which is health, cunning, which is basically your craft in the old game. Strength is still the same name here. And then each player will be given 2 character cards randomly, or you can decide to pick, and then the character will choose, the player will choose which character they want. And so you may want to look at the powers, what the strength and cunning is. So I'm going to choose Clayface, and then this one will be put back into the box. I take my Clayface figure. So then let's see what the next step is. So as I mentioned, you're going to be dealt 2 cards. You're going to choose one. You see what location. So Clayface here starts in the supply closet. So the supply closet, unfortunately, is not shown on the main board here. It's actually off to the side here. So it's actually right here in this corner that you can't see. So he would be starting way over here. But for the sake of purposes, I'll just put him right here in the open cell here. Next, you acquire any coins, fate tokens, feats, and or objects, and then you get to set your stats and then add 1 to your strength or cunning. So let's see how what Clayface gets here. He gets 5 fate, 2 strength, so I'll turn the dial to 2, 3 cunning, 1 coin, and no feats. So he does not get to draw a feat card. Two-Face would have began with a feat if I would have chosen him. So now I'm going to do my +1. Because he gets to add his cunning to his strength during combat, and I could fight inmates that have a cunning skill, I'm going to increase his cunning by 1. So I have a 4 in cunning and 2 in strength. So that's where I decided to add his +1. Okay, so the character is set up, and each player would do this. All right, so some things to keep in mind is that the strength and cunning can never drop below the starting value. No more than +2 fate tokens you can have above your starting value. So Clayface starts with 5. I can never have more than 7. Health can never be above 2. So I start, oh, that's one thing I forgot to do here. His health starts as 4, so he can never go, most characters start at 4. He can never have more than 6 health. And if you're removed from the game if you lose all your health. And then the start player is the one who most recently read a Batman comic book or watched a Batman movie or TV show goes first. Then you proceed clockwise around the board. I'm sorry, clockwise where the players are sitting. Okay, so players take turns, you roll the die and move, and then you encounter the space or encounter the character in the space. So this is an important point here. So let's say Two-Face is standing here. I roll the die to move. Let's say I rolled a 3. I could either encounter Two-Face or the space. And in fact, some spaces have special conditions, like here's a guard post. I may even encounter the guard post instead of the face to move up, which I'm going to go over here in a moment. Okay, so typically you move the full amount on the die, clockwise or counterclockwise. You cannot double back. You ignore pass-through spaces, heroes, and characters. And then I'm going to, like I said, go over the special spaces. Now, if you roll a 1, you will move Batman, which I will go over here soon. So let's take a look again at what I rolled. So let's say I rolled a 4. I go 1, 2, 3, 4. I can pass Two-Face, that's not a problem. In fact, I can even land on Batman and not encounter him. In fact, you cannot encounter Batman when you land on him. He only encounters you when he lands on you. But see, I also could have went 1, 2, 3, 4 if I could defeat the guard to go up into the second floor. Okay, so player actions in the encounter space. You got to pay attention to the alignment of the character. So, for instance, Two-Face is righteous. So some spaces, such as the chapel, he benefits when he lands here. But he does not want to land on the morgue where he can lose life being a righteous evil player. And there's chaotic, and then there's also there's another one too. I'm trying to remember which one it is. So there's chaotic and righteous. Oh, indifferent. That's the other alignment. So another thing you want to keep in mind is that there's this flow chart. And until you learn the game, you may need to refer to the flow chart as to the order of when things occur, which I'll go over here in a little bit. Okay, so when you encounter the space, you either draw a card or encounter an existing card. You resolve cards from lowest to highest by the encounter number, which I'll show in a moment here. You resolve any encounter cards that are equal in number in the drawn order. So let's take a look at that first. I already mentioned about alignment, but you also want to pay attention to any spaces that say or may, because you don't always have to do what's in the space. So let's take a look here. So let's say Clayface did move up into this space, and there was already a card here. Okay, there was a follower here. There still needs to be drawn 2 more cards. In fact, I drew from the wrong deck. I have to draw from the second level deck. So let's say there was a helmet left there by somebody else. And then I need to draw 2 more cards. So it says here I need to draw 3. So I take a look now. I'm going to go to this camera. Let me move this over. And then I include also what was in the space, the helmet. So I put them in order. So here's a 2, will go first. Then the 3. Then if I survive, the helmet. So Batgirl, I would have to fight her first with a strength 8, and then I'd fight a raving inmate with a cunning of 10. And if I manage to defeat both of them, I can pick up the helmet. There's also some spaces where you can encounter, let's say somehow an inmate was moved here to the chapel. You would fight the raving inmate first, and then if you survive, if you don't lose a life or you defeat him, then you can encounter the space. So you have to encounter the cards in order from least to greatest, and then the space would be last. Now, as I mentioned about alignment, here you are looking at the chapel, and then you also need to pay attention to any keywords like or may. So it says here, righteous, evil, either heal up to your starting health value for free, or search the chapel by rolling 1 die. So some spaces you roll a die and you carry out the effect. Some of them you don't have a choice. So for instance, if you land in the boiler room, you must roll the die if you land here. Whereas if you go to some spaces, you don't have to do anything. It's a may keyword. So other things to keep in mind is that when you land on a space at the end of your turn, you can ditch any coins, objects, and or followers, and you have to ditch some objects if you exceed you can only usually carry 4 unless you have a bag that allows you to carry up to 8 items. And then you apply any lose turn effects, if any. So that means that you still complete your current turn, and if there was something that caused you to lose a turn, it would happen at the very end after everything is done for your current turn, and then you'd miss the next turn. Okay, so let's take a look at some special spaces. Here you have the guard posts, because in order to go from the guard post to the security door, to the tower entrance, you go around the whole tower to get to the control room entrance, and then into security control room. Now there's ways to skip these. For instance, there's items that allow you to go to the second region, or spaces that allow you to skip it, but I'm going over the typical ways that you need to get past the guard, and then go to the security door, and then here. So let's take a look at those rules. Okay, so to pass the guard, you need to defeat the guard with a strength 9 combat. Now I'll go over combat here in a moment. Now the guard does not roll a combat die. Now that's an important rule to remember. You just need to be able to, so you might have 6 strength. If you roll a 4 or higher, you'll be able to move past him. If you fail, you lose a life and your turn ends. Or if you tie, you don't pass and you end your turn. Or some characters have evade, where you can use your evade skill to move by him. Or you can use guard keys objects card, which allows you to move past him. Now if you land on the space, the guard space, you either draw the card and ignore the guard, or you encounter the guard and the next turn move up. That's, in other words, if you land on it exactly. So you either draw the card, encounter the guard, defeat him, and then move up next turn, or and that's basically the 2 options. Now, if you rolled over like I showed before, so if I rolled a 4, 1, 2, if I were to defeat him, then I would go 3, 4, either way up here. Now, it's one thing that you can get is you can buy lock picks in the supply closet, and then for 3 coins. And then when you are in a dark room space or an office, you can say using the lock picks to get the guard's keys. And then when you can use the guard's keys to get past the guard post. So that's one way you can get past as well. Okay, so let's take a look at the security door. Now, as I mentioned, the security door is up here in the corner. So once you get past the guard, or you get to this region some other way, and just like the guard post, you either land on it and try to get through it, or you can roll higher. So if I again rolled a 5, 1, 2, and then I could encounter the security door, but then I would stop here if I get past it. So let's take a look though at the rules. So you got to roll 2 dice under or equal to your chosen strength or cunning. So you get to choose which one you want to roll under. So this is important because if you do not pass, you lose 1 point in that ability. Keeping in mind that you can never go below your starting value. So then you remain in the space, and if you don't pass, and lose 1 stat. But if you do pass, you will start in this entrance, this tower entrance, and then you will move next turn around. So if I were to look at Clayface, he's not strong enough to do it yet. In order to roll 2 dice under 4, I mean, I could try because I can't lose, actually I can lose my +1 that I added at the beginning of the game. So because I'm only supposed to have 3 cunning, but because I added 1 at the beginning of the game as my bonus stat, I could lose it if I roll a 5 or higher. So I wouldn't even attempt it at this stage in the game. Okay, so that's the security door. All right, so now we take a look at the tower region. So you move half of the die rolled rounded up, keeping in mind that you must move forward unless you declare turning back. And you cannot change mind if you're turning back. You must continue moving until the tower entrance is reached. So if I were to get up there and I rolled a 4, I'd go 2 spaces and I'd draw 2 cards, and I would draw from the Encounter 3 deck. If I rolled a 1, I'd only go 1 space. If I rolled a 2, I'd only go 1 space. If I rolled a 6, I'd go 3 spaces. Now let's say I need to turn back because I forgot the security card. You need to have a security key card to get a certain spot in the tower. Then I'd say, I'd declare I'm turning back, and then I would have to go back. I can't change my mind and go back and forth all the way back to the entrance. And then if I want to go back in, I could. Okay, so now we're at the control. Let's talk about the control room, which is right here. So when you get to the control room, you have to have the security key card to move into the security control room. So I'm at the entrance, and to move into the control room, you must have this card. So you stop there. You stop here. Even if I rolled a 5, I don't carry on. I just stop here, and then I would use my card. Okay, so let's take a look at the security control room, how that works. So once reached, you immediately move Batman. Doesn't matter where he is. So if Batman was down here, he immediately meets me up here. And then he will fight me at a Strength 12 or Cunning 12 combat. Now I get to choose which one. And if defeated, I would win the game. If I lose, I get kicked back to the security door, all the way back here. If tied, I remain there to fight again the following turn, which means if somebody was close behind me, let's say Two-Face was here, and he would enter on the next turn and then defeat Batman, then he would win. So that's why if I tied or got knocked out, someone else might be in the tower trying to race me to get there as well. Okay, so you have the option to encounter a character, not a space. So if you do encounter a character, it's typically going to be in strength combat or using ability that you might have to steal something. So some characters might say if you land another character, you can take something from them. Like Harley Quinn can take followers from other characters. And why would you want to do this? Well, if you engage in combat with a character, the winner can force the loser to lose a health or to take an object or a coin from the character. So sometimes you're going to want to land on characters Let's say Two-Face has the security key card, and I don't want to waste my time trying to get one. If I land on Two-Face, I can battle him in strength combat, and then take away the key card if I win. But if I lose, he might take something from me. So let's take a look at how combat works, first with enemies, and then we'll look at how it's different for characters. Okay, so first you're going to compare strength or cunning depending on the enemy card. So let's take a look at some of the cards here. Actually, if I remember, I drew some in the level 2. So you see that Batgirl has a strength 8, and that the raving inmate has a cunning of 10. So you'll use your strength stat. So I would have 2. Well, because I'm Clayface, I get to add my cunning to my strength. So I'd have 6 versus 8. But against the raving inmate, I don't get to add my strength in a cunning combat. So I'd have 4 versus 10. So I'd likely lose that one because I can't, even if I roll a 6, I can't beat it unless I have a feat or a weapon to tie in. So let's take a look here at. So in most cases, only one weapon can be used. The character Clayface cannot use any weapons. The character will roll 1 die, and another player will roll 1 die for the enemy. And then you would account for any space or card effects in the area. So let me explain that. So if Batgirl was encountered in this space, it says here that any enemies that you fight here add 2 to their attack roll. So Batgirl would have 8 plus 2 in that space. So you got to pay attention to things like that. And there might be some effects that are drawn cards that can do that. And there might even be feats that can be played to help out an enemy. So anyway, let's say if it was out here, I'm Clayface. I'm going to add my cunning and my strength, so I have 6, so I roll the die. 9, the other character would roll. 11, so I lost, so I would lose a life, and that would end my turn. So then I would just turn my dial to a 3. So again, the rule is explained here. You compare attack results, but if they're equal, it's a standoff and there's no effect. Keeping in mind that as a character, you could also spend, so if I move this over a little bit here because I put them off to the side, if I didn't like my roll, I could spend a fate token, re-roll that 3, got a 5, so now I have a 5 plus 6, 11, and so at least I tied and got so I rolled a 5, the other player rolled a 3, so 11, at least I tied and did not lose a life. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that some characters will have armor objects or even start with objects. And so if that first example, when I lost a life, I could, well, with Clayface I can't, because Clayface may not use any weapons or armor. But if it was Two-Face, I could use a helmet or a shield or bulletproof vest. So if I show you what those look like here. So if I had a bulletproof vest and I wasn't Clayface, and if I lost a life, I then immediately roll a die to see if I lost that life. So if I rolled a 6, then I didn't lose the life. So there's a special rule if there's more than one enemy with the same type of enemy. So here you have an enemy with a cunning of 10. And then, like I said, here was Batgirl with a strength of 8. Let's say, though, that there was a second enemy in the space. So I'm looking for an enemy now. Let's say there was oh, that's an object. Let's say there was a SWAT officer. So the SWAT officer and Batgirl, you would combine their attack values. So you would, if they're all in the same space, first you would have to fight the SWAT officer and Batgirl with a combined value of 10. And because they have an encounter number of 2, you'd fight them first. If you defeat them, then you'd fight the raving inmate, which is a 3, which is next in order with a cunning of 10. Now, as I pointed out, remember, you can spend fate tokens once on your turn to re-roll a die that has just been rolled, but you cannot affect the dice rolled by other people. So you cannot affect Batman's die or another character's die. So let's see how character combat is different. If able, the defending character may choose to evade with an ability object or feat card. But if the character can't evade or does not want to evade, then you move into combat. And so both characters will decide what abilities, objects, followers, and feats to use. After each character rolls to attack, the attacking player decides whether or not to use a fate token, followed by the defending player. Now this is important. The attacking players may be happy with their roll of a 3, for instance, but the defending player decides, so the attacking player says, I'm not going to re-roll that. So the defending player says, well, I'm going to re-roll my die, which could change the result. Say the defender rolled a 1, and the attacking player can't change their mind if the defending player decides to use a fate token. And so basically, the highest attack score wins. Now, one thing I want to point out is things that can affect combat. So let's say I wasn't Clayface. I was Two-Face, who can use weapons. Never mind that the stats are different right now. So if I had a bat, I can add +1 to my strength. So let's say he did raise up his strength during the game. I'd have 4 + 1. You could also have followers that add to your strength, or a legendary object like the Riddler's cane, which isn't a weapon. It's actually considered just an object. Or for instance, the utility belt adds +1 to your strength. It doesn't say in combat, so that means that you get +1 strength all the time, regardless if it's combat or not. But in combat, you'd also get it as well. And then, like I said, there are followers that can add to your strength or to your cunning. So that's why you want to compare. You want to look at what objects you're going to use in the combat, keeping in mind you can only use one weapon. And then you might play a feat card that adds to the value of your combat, or use a one-time use item where you expend it and it gives you plus for just that one combat. Okay, so one thing that we haven't talked about yet is when you roll 1 for Batman. So when you roll 1, that character decides where they're going to move first. So let's say Batman's here. Okay, actually Batman's right here. Let me go back to Clayface. And I roll 1 for movement. So first I decide, do I want to go here or here? So I'm going to move Clayface here. Then I roll for Batman. Now I would move Batman 6, so I would go anywhere over there. But let's say I rolled a 1. I can land Batman on Two-Face, and now Batman and Two-Face would have to fight a combat. And you take a look what region Batman's in. He's in the first floor, so he only has a strength of 7. Or a cunning of 7, because the player who's being attacked gets to decide which to be attacked in strength or cunning. Now, if there was 2 characters in the space, let's say that I was also in the space and I purposely moved Batman on me, I could decide whether or not to have Batman attack Two-Face or me. Now, why would I want to attack myself? Because if I think I can beat him, I get a reward for beating Batman. So that is one strategy, is that you have Batman attack your own character so you can get the rewards. Or you have it attack another character to slow down that character to make him lose a life. So let's take a look again here. So One thing too that Batman can do, he's going to optionally go into a different region as his first move. So let's take a look at that again. So again, remember I rolled a 1, I went here, Batman rolled a 6. So as his first move, he can go into the second level and then move around this way. So say Two-Face was up here, I really want to get to him. So it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, that's still not enough, but he can get close. So combat with Batman, again, just to review that. So the attack character chooses the type of combat, like I said. So when Batman lands on somebody, the character who's being attacked chooses the type of combat. The player who wins the combat consults the chart for the reward, and then you roll for what you get. So Batman remains in the space where combat occurred. If they lose, the character loses a life. And again, this is something I had to look up on Board Game Geek. If you land on Batman, you cannot engage him in combat. So again, here's the rewards. So one reason why you want to get into combat is because you need to collect enemy cards that are defeated to turn them in for infamy. So you gain 1 strength or cunning for every 5 points of matching enemy strength or cunning. So excess points are lost. So again, going back to this example here, let's say the Batgirl is defeated. I could turn her in right away to go up 1 strength, or I can keep it and hope to get 2 more and then turn it in for 10 and get 2 strength. Same with that raving inmate. If that raving inmate was defeated, I can turn in the raving inmate for 2 cunning. So player actions, spending fate tokens. As I've already mentioned, anytime you roll the die, oh, by the way, I did forget to mention this. Backing up here a little bit. So when Batman moves, whether or not Batman attacks a character, remember when I said I moved here, I first moved here and then moved Batman, then I complete my turn after Batman does any actions. So you just pause your turn, move, do Batman, then you go back to your turn and complete the rest of your turn. Okay, so back to spinning fate tokens. Basically, you use them to modify a die roll that you roll. Now, one special rule is that when you're rolling 2 dice, say you're trying to get through the security door, and you roll too high, and wow, I got to roll that 6 because if I exceed my stat, I'm going to lose a stat. So I'm going to re-roll the 6. I spend the fate token, and I re-roll it, and I rolled a 6 again, but so I didn't roll very well. So you can only spend 1 fate token on a turn. But if I rolled a 1, maybe that's what I needed to do to get by. Okay, so one thing, additional rules is using feat cards, keeping in mind that you can, if you have only a cunning of 1, 2, or 3, 1 or 2, you cannot have a feat card. If you have a 3, you can have 1. With a 4, you can have 2. With 5, you can have 2. And with 6, you can have 3 or more. So when you draw a feat card, you look at it, you read the directions as to when it can be used, and you hold on to it until you can use it. You just can't discard it to discard it. Now, when you can play feat cards, you can always play as many feat cards as you can on your turn, but you are limited to 1 feat card per turn on someone else's turn. So if you're playing with 3 characters, 3 other players, you can play a feat card on the second player, the third player, and the fourth player if you have enough feat cards. And then on your turn, though, you can play as many as you want. Okay, now another special rule is evading. Anything that attacks a character, you can evade on the first and second floor only, which means that you're not able to use your evade powers in the tower region. So you cannot use if you have evade or a feat card or an object that allows you to use evade. You cannot use it in the tower region. Enemies that appear as a result of an event, place, or stranger cards, you can try to evade them. Any character attempting to attack or use a special ability, you can try to evade as well. Now, Batman can never be evaded. Now, as mentioned briefly in the beginning, you can only carry up to 4 objects. But you can have as many followers as you like. Feats is also limited by your cunning, which I already explained. And then there are some objects that are limited by alignment. So, for instance, the police radio cannot be used by the Joker, but in fact, he can't even carry it. But if some items say only can be used by a righteous character, you can carry it, but you can't use it. But some items will say you can't even pick it up if you're a certain alignment. So you got to pay attention to that as well. Okay, so let's take a look at Deranged. Some spaces on the board, if you roll poorly, like you roll 1 in the exam room visiting the psychiatrist, or if a stranger comes up and you roll 1, you can become, and I forget what the name of the stranger that can come up, you can become deranged. So what you do is you flip over your card. So say Clayface becomes deranged. Any objects that I had, so let's say I had the security key card, I would drop it in the space I'm in. So I drop it in the space I'm in. And any coins that I'm carrying would be dropped there. And now the feat card I keep, but I can't cast it or use it because my cunning is temporarily a 1. And so for 3 turns, I can only move 1 space. And I have a strength of 1 and a cunning of 1. So basically I want to avoid any spaces where if I engage in combat, I could lose health. Because you still have the health that you had before you were deranged, but it doesn't stop you from losing health as you move 1 around the board. So at the end of 3 turns, again, I could go back like this. First, turn 1, I go here. Turn 2, I go here. Turn 3, I could go back. And then hopefully, if I roll a 1, I can get my stuff back. By the way, I forgot to mention at the very beginning is that you can only go when you can't backtrack when you're rolling. So if I rolled a 5, I got to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 5 this way. I can't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I can't do that. So you can't backtrack. Okay, so another thing to keep to go over here is character death. So when you die, you discard any feat and infamy cards and fate tokens that the current character had. Then you select a new character using the same setup rules. I should say rules, not rolls. And you pick 2 characters, you keep 1. And then the new character inherits any objects, coins, and followers of the deceased character, except any objects that are affected by alignment, and then you start, and then you put that new character in its start space. Okay, so there are some optional rules. No inheritance. You can play a version where when the character dies, that you don't get the past character's items. You can play it like the original Talisman rules, where it takes 7 infamy to increase the strength or cunning. You could also play where you don't get the +1 bonus stat at the very beginning. You could have the rule where you can ditch cards before you draw on a space, just in case you're worried that you're going to lose cards. You can drop them first. And then there's Bloodbath, where it's basically a player elimination option where you can, once a character dies, that player is out of the game. And then I do not know of any expansions yet. So that is a run-through of Talisman Batman. Please take a look at the playthrough. And we also did an unboxing, and then we also reviewed it. So there's 3 other videos, if you haven't had a chance to see, that are about Talisman Batman. So I'm David, and thank you for watching this video. If there's any rules mistakes I made, please comment below, and I will put those changes in the description. And please remember to like and subscribe.